Welcome Emeritus Professor Gilbert Khadiagala of the International Relations Department at the University of the Witwatersrand, who joins us for more analysis on Uganda's election outcome as well as politics around the election amid concerns of the legitimacy of the announced results. Prof, it's always a pleasure. Welcome. Let's get your overall assessment briefly of these polls, right from the campaign trail in build-up to and subsequent results that, of course, Museveni was re-elected through a landslide victory yesterday. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. This election was a predictable election because it is Museveni has announced that it may be his last time to run for elections. He's been around since, and he's been winning elections since Uganda became a competitive political system in 1996. So we could argue that this was really a predictable election because he's been here, he knows how to rig the elections. He has the military behind him, he has the state around him, and the opposition has been increasingly very weak over the years because it has never really had the opportunity to have what you would call a level playing field. So this is an election that was conducted within a structure of constraints for the opposition, and therefore I think Museveni is happy that he's gotten, the elections are over. I think he was saying today that in fact his 18 million voters did not show up, only 8 showed up, and he's very happy that the opposition was not as embarrassed, because he was saying if everybody came to vote, it would have been too bad for them. So the level playing field has been very much tilted towards the government.
Well, Professor, he's been winning elections, but I mean, a leader who has been at the helm of Uganda for decades, what does Museveni even have to bring in terms of change and meaningful futuristic contribution, whether politically, economically or otherwise, for his people that he has failed to deliver since 1986?
The legitimacy of Mr. Museveni lies in the fact that I think he recreated a modern Ugandan state. Uganda was under intense civil conflicts before then. It was a country in tatters, but since 1986, there was really discernible progress in restoration of stability, in rebuilding some of the institutions of the state. The economy hasn't done very well, but he still claims that, in fact, he was the only person who could reverse the instability that Uganda went through. So that broader legitimacy of the revolutionary who brought change, who brought stability, still, I think, resonates with a lot of Ugandans. So, in fact, Museveni is still pretty much very popular because elections in urban areas where it's very predictable, but in the rural areas, I think he is still very fairly popular. But the point here is that I think he's legitimated himself for the last 40 years as the hero who brought stability to Uganda. And that's why he doesn't want any competition. That is why he's made it very clear that the opposition is just an irritant. And he doesn't want them, he puts them in jail, and it's very common, very predictable feature of Ugandan politics that the opposition will never really have a chance to win any of the elections as long as Museveni is still around.
Then how fair are those elections then, Prof? And what's the point then? Because what are the relevant questions then that not only citizens of Uganda but the continent at large who keep voting these type of leaders back into office, knowing full well they will not be able to change their lives for the better? Are we so far removed from our own realities that we are now no longer subscribing to the importance and power of our vote? I mean, I fail to comprehend, Prof, how he allegedly achieved a landslide landslide victory. And the pattern that we have seen is that these leaders, they now order internet shutdowns, they silence or discredit the opposition, as you've rightly pointed out, and quickly seal the results and move on as if there were no serious allegations during the elections. Why is the continent silent on this modus operandi?
Democracy is on the decline in Africa. And some people argue democracy is on the decline globally. But I think in East Africa, we've seen in recent years, from Tanzania last year and Uganda now, that in fact the governments in power are not interested in free and fair elections. And there are no constraints, there are no restraints on these leaders because they have the military behind them, they have the security forces behind them. So the elections have just become a 5-year process of ticking off the boxes, but actually elections don't make any substantive change across Africa. This is the crisis we are in right now. And we are going to see more elections in 2026 that are simply going to follow that template of the leaders just want to get elections over with because they want to continue with governing and ruling. And the people really do not feature very much. So it's a bigger crisis that we have to address as Africans because the decline of democracy is a worrying trend since from the 1990s, we thought we were on the right trajectory of elections that change leaders, elections that make a difference in people's lives. But I think the Uganda story is beginning to show that when you are in power for 40 years, what is the incentive of leaving power if you've been around for 40 years? So in that context, elections don't actually mean much. I think, as I said, they're just ticking the boxes exercises. And then the country can keep going on with what it's been doing all this time. Hopefully, Museveni has said he's not going to run again. So in 5 years, probably that's when Uganda will have a real transition to a new kind of leadership. So we'll see whether that will mark a decisive phase in the way politics is organized in Uganda. But as long as Museveni is still around, I don't think we're going to see any change.
Great input there, Professor. Thank you so much for that. That is Professor Gilbert Khadiagala, International Relations Expert at Wits University, on the Uganda election results.